Hi, I'm Peter Sparrow from the IBM Z Center for Secure Engineering. Today we're going to talk about the Common Vulnerability Scoring System. The number one question we get from customers is, how do I get additional information about security vulnerabilities to know if they should apply patches to their system and how fast? The first slide I'd like to share with you is an example of a ZOS CVSS data file. That file contains critical CVSS information that can be used to help determine the urgency and applicability of a security fix to your system. In this slide, the APAR numbers have been changed since it's generally considered an IBM confidential file. The base score in the column that's designated in green is a number from 0 to 10 that indicates how severe the vulnerability is. This number can be used to determine the urgency of putting a patch on your system. The second column, the temporal score, we'll leave for another day. If you look at the vector, there are two types of vectors there. One that's prefaced with CVSS colon 3.0, so that's a version 3 score. And then you'll see in the third line, there's a vector that has no prefix to it. That's a version 2 score. As we're moving forward, you'll be seeing version 3 scores only. If you take a look at the bottom APAR on that list, you see the first set of metrics after the CVSS colon 3.0. That's the base metrics that were used to figure out the base score. Those are marked in green. That's the information that you'll use to determine the applicability of the vulnerability to your system. On the next slide, you'll see an example of CVSS base metrics. CVSS stands for Common Vulnerability Scoring System. The best place to look for the information is at first.org/CVSS. The second slide, CVSS base metrics, will help you determine the applicability of a vulnerability to your system. The different metrics in the column on the left cover things like attack vector, AV, or access complexity, AC, and how that may affect your system. The other important metrics to look at on this slide are the impact metrics: confidentiality impact, integrity impact, and availability impact. Depending on your system, each of those may have a different importance. As we're looking at things like the attack vector, whether the attacker needs to be local or have access to the physical machine is bad enough. But if they could get to your system from an adjacent network, meaning the same subnet, or from any network, that's a lot worse. For the access complexity, if it's a very complicated attack, that would be listed as high. If the attack is easier, that would be listed as low. The impact for confidentiality, integrity, and availability will be listed as none, low, or high. You could think of this at a high level as none means it's not affected, low means it's partial, and high means you better watch out. On the third slide, we'll take a look at a sample. In this sample, you see that the base CVSS score is a 10. That's the highest it could be. So this is a pretty serious problem that's going to have a high urgency. Now we need to take a look at the applicability. So the access vector is listed as N, which means it's a network attack. Anybody with access to the network can use this attack. The access complexity is low, so it's an easy attack to perpetrate on your system. Then if we look over at the confidentiality, integrity, and availability, they're both high. So the confidentiality of data on your system is put at risk, the integrity of your system is at risk, and the availability of your system is at risk. With this type of vulnerability, you may have mitigations in place such as a firewall or intrusion prevention system. Moving on to the second sample of CVSS information, this one has a base score of 4.2, which is pretty low. It's considered medium, but it's pretty low. So for this one, you have to be local to the system, so the attack vector is in L. The access complexity is high, so it's hard to perpetrate this attack. And if you look at the confidentiality and integrity, they're both marked as none. The real risk here is the availability. So depending on what kind of workload you have running on this system, availability may not be an issue. You may be running a high availability environment for a web server, and availability may be taken care of. In the third sample of CVSS data, if we look at the impact of this vulnerability, confidentiality is high, and integrity and availability are both none. If confidentiality is a concern for your environment, if you have PCI data, HIPAA data, or things like that, then this is no longer a medium vulnerability, but should be considered high for your environment. Hopefully this video has helped you understand a little bit more about how to determine the urgency and applicability of a vulnerability to your system. Enterprise Knights of IBM Z, providing educational insights to the security and integrity of our platform.